What are some NSFW history facts that do not get taught in schools? Please like, subscribe and comment so I can create more videos for you. The actual death of Ratcliffe, you know, the oddly proportioned villain from Pocahontas. From the Encyclopedia Virginia, the colonists, led by Captain John Ratcliffe, walked into an ambush. About 33 men, or 2/3 of their number, were killed. The Indians captured Ratcliffe, and their women skinned him alive using mussel shells. Encyclopedia Virginia webpage. Every year, it was the pharaoh's solemn duty to go to the banks of the Nile, disrobe, and masturbate. A great many other men would follow him, and when the pharaoh was done, they too would bash one out on the banks. Further, it was believed that the pharaoh had to be sure that as great an amount of his gentleman's relish as possible landed in the river itself rather than on the land in order to guarantee a good future harvest. My initial concern was about how they would ensure that there were no lurking crocodiles that might suddenly splash up and eat the pharaoh while he was jerking it, but my current thought is that if I was a crocodile, this would be the one day of the year that I would make sure to take a fucking vacation and not be swimming around in the Nile near the palace. Back in the day, pre-revolutionary times or so, one of the only things that women in the English colonies were allowed to have expertise on was the female body reproductive system. Occasionally, a case would come up in court that required the inspection of a woman's body. Usually it would be to determine if she had been raped or otherwise had sex out of wedlock. To handle these sorts of cases, the court would convene a jury of women from a nearby town to perform the inspection and report their findings. In one particular case though, a married woman was petitioning for the annulment of her marriage on the basis that her husband was impotent. To test these claims, the court convened a jury of women tasked solely with attempting to bring the woman's husband to erection. The article didn't mention the result of this case, but this remains one of very few cases that a jury of women was convened in a court of law for any purpose besides their expertise in women's bodies. Edit, I, for one, like to think he was playing the long con the whole time. When Marie Antoinette was imprisoned by the French citizens, they took her kids. Then they had her oldest son raped by prostitutes so that he would contract their STDs. They then tried to use this as grounds to try her for abusing her children. The accusations went nowhere. So the poor kid was given a ton of venereal diseases for nothing. Edit, spelled Marie Antoinette's name wrong. Edit 2, holy fuck, so many upvotes. Also to those who are asking my source, I read it on Wikipedia. I went back to try and get a more detailed source. Wikipedia source was Common Eagle, Susan, 2009. Marie Therese, The Fate of Marie Antoinette's Daughter. London, Bloomsbury Publishing. Page 137. ISBN 978-07475-9666-0. Hope this helps anybody who is curious. I read his testicle was injured while riding a wooden stick horse and that they used that as evidence that she had abused him. In 1928 the United Fruit Company from Louisiana, had banana plantation in Colombia, and the workers organized a strike against them. They demanded written contracts, 8-hour work days, 6-day work weeks and the elimination of food coupons. The strike was one of the biggest strikes in Colombian history, and many communistic and liberal parties participated. U.S. officials in Colombia, along with United Fruit representatives, portrayed the workers' strike as communist with subversive tendency. In telegrams to the U.S. Secretary of the Government, the United States of America threatened to invade with the U.S. Marine Corps if the Colombian government did not act to protect United Fruit's interests. An unknown number of workers died after the conservative government of Miguel Méndez sent the Colombian army to end the union. An army regiment from Bogotá was dispatched by the government to deal with the strikers, which it deemed to be subversive. Whether these troops were sent in at the behest of the United Fruit Company did not clearly emerge. The troops set up their machine guns on the roofs of the low buildings at the corners of the main square, closed off the access streets, and after a 5 Minute warning opened fire into a dense Sunday crowd of workers and their wives and children who had gathered, after Sunday Mass, to wait for an anticipated address from the governor. General Cortés Vargas, who commanded the troops during the massacre, took responsibility for 47 casualties. In reality, the exact number of casualties has never been confirmed. Herrera Soto, co-author of a comprehensive and detailed study of the 1928 strike, has put together various estimates given by contemporaries and historians, ranging from 47 to as high as 2,000. Survivors, popular oral histories and written documents give figures 800, 3000, killed, adding that the killers threw them into the sea. Source: Banana Massacre, Wikipedia webpage. Thomas Granger was the first juvenile to be executed in what would become the USA. He was convicted of buggery with a mare, a cow, 2 goats, several sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey, and hung in September 1642. Edit. Thank you everyone for educating me about the difference between hung and hanged. I'll never get the image of horse stick out of my head now. Edit the second. Gilded for talking about animal buggery. What a world we live in. They also executed all the animals, even though they were doubtless non-consenting. I seem to remember that Cotton Mather was somehow involved in the prosecution. What really baffled me, though, was the turkey. Turkeys don't have a vagina and there is no penetration. They reproduce by rubbing their cloaca together. So how did this guy have sex with a turkey? I think the turkey got a bad rap. The US government did some pretty messed up experiments on their own soldiers using chemical weapons and drugs like LSD at a facility called Edgewood. There's a documentary on it called Bad Trip to Edgewood, Yahoo webpage, which includes a recording of a soldier doing an obstacle course on PCP. Edit. Here is a link to a 2-part podcast about the Edgewood Arsenal, Part 1, webpage, Part 2, kavekamattaradio.com webpage. The people who ran that place got up to all sorts of shenanigans. I'm posting the exact same thing every time this comes up. Unit 731 and the Comfort Women Sex Slaves. Excerpt from one of those sex slaves' diary: you will be treated good if you dedicate yourself to the Emperor. I was forced to have sex with 10-15 soldiers every night. Then I got pregnant, but they removed my uterus with fetus, because they thought I was still usable. On the 27th of August, a soldier with a sword asked, "Who can serve 100 soldiers?" 15 girls who didn't raise their hands were killed as an example to the rest of the girls. Soldiers took a naked woman by her head and feet, and rolled her on a board with nails protruding out. Blood spurted and flesh dangled on the board. Soldiers boiled the dead girl's head, and forced other girls to drink that soup. On the 1st of December 1933, an officer killed a girl by stabbing a metal stick in her womb. On the 4th of February, one girl had heated iron stick brutally shoved in her womb and died immediately just because she didn't notify to the officers that she had syphilis and eventually transferred it to one of them. After her death, there was burnt flesh left on the red heated iron stick. Soldiers covered a girl's whole body with tattoos by intending to kill them in the first place. One Chinese man saw those girls being thrown away by the Japanese soldiers. After they were gone, he rescued 2 girls who were barely alive, and nursed them for 2 months. The worst part, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Japan has never acknowledged any of this ever happened as a nation, government. The US had a eugenics program into the 70s that sterilized thousands of women, mostly black poor. They would often do this under the guise of an emergency appendectomy post-birth. A woman gave birth to a rape baby and didn't know why she could never have children after. She was able to receive damages. Look up Buck v. Bell. Edit. And from others reminders, Native American women were targeted too, and surprisingly. Aside from targeting groups, women deemed mentally unfit, ill, morally inferior, or too low of IQ were included in this. Same thing in Canada. Leilani Muir awarded nearly $1 million for wrongful sterilization. In a documentary I saw, the doctors that examined her nether regions years post-surgery said it looked like a butcher had done it. Leilani Muir, Wikipedia web page, all because she had an IQ of lower than 70. I actually didn't know until recently, but the core of Discovery only ate meat and had incredible constipation. One day they all ate pills they named thunderclappers, which made them shit out everything immediately. But the pills had a bit of metal in them, so if you go out on the same trail as the core of Discovery with a metal detector, you can find the exact place Lewis, Clark and the rest of the core took the biggest shits of their lives. Edit. My top comment is now about the biggest literal shitstorm in history. Thanks guys. You hear about the Nazis using concentration camps, but not so much about the British using them in the Boer War. Women and children, 28,000 of them. Second Boer War, Wikipedia webpage. Edit. I'm English and was not taught this in school. Also, why the fuck do you feel the need to bring comparison into it? Is the act not as bad then if not as many died as in the hands of the Nazis? I could say technological advancement and more local organization made it easier, but why should I? The story that caused me to get my degree in history, TL. Dr. Benedict Arnold's naked wife branded him the first man to commit treason against the colonies. Everyone know the name Benedict Arnold? No? Well, he is recognized as the first man to commit treason against the American colonies. They teach kids that he tried to turn over the fort at West Point in New York in exchange for a knighthood or some such title. What people don't know is how the colonial army found out. Arnold's wife was a loyalist, or someone who agreed with the British and was not for the colonies to be free. She convinces her husband, who was in charge of West Point, to talk to the British and see what they could do in order to gain political favor and power. Arnold and the British Navy, who were anchored nearby, came to the agreement that on a certain night, Arnold would leave a skeleton crew on guard at the fort and Arnold would surrender it to the British. On the evening it was to happen, Washington and his troops had arrived on their way further north. Asking Arnold if he could bunk his men for the night, Washington and his troops pitched their camp. That night, Washington couldn't sleep and decided to take a walk. On realizing that the fort was poorly guarded, he reinforced the fort with his own men. As the British attacked and were routed, Arnold escaped on horseback. Now, here's the reason I became a history major. What they don't teach you is that the colonial army found out about Arnold's betrayal because he left his wife behind. Arnold's wife lived in the barracks with him and, on discovering he had left her, she went mad. The colonial army discovered her running around the room stark naked and pulling her hair out. It wasn't until she knocked herself unconscious by running full force into a wall that they were able to apprehend her. She then told them the plan. That, my dear friends, is how Benedict Arnold was branded a traitor. Source: my source was from a history professor who taught his class like a biography. As an example, we learned about Benjamin Franklin not just through textbooks, but his lectures, which made things entertaining. The cause of Benedict Arnold's treason is much more complicated than simply his wife talked him into it. Arnold was, by most accounts, a hero in the early parts of the American Revolution. He was part of the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, which secured a huge number of artillery for the American side, though the story of how that went down was taken as an insult by Arnold. He was the key figure in the all-important Battle of Saratoga, though his commanding officer, Horatio Gates, took great care to omit any mention of Arnold while reporting on the battle. While Arnold recovered from injuries sustained at Saratoga, Washington put him in charge of a recently reclaimed Philadelphia as he trusted Arnold's loyalty and leadership skills above most others. Arnold's problems came in the form of politics. He wasn't well equipped to deal with the political bickering and posturing other generals took part in. Time and time again he was passed over for promotion or praise by the Continental Congress in favor of egotistical buffoons like Horatio Gates and Charles Lee. Washington, ever respectful of military tradition, failed to display the appreciation he felt for Arnold, as doing so would be seen as a political blunder and as an insult to officers of higher rank. While it was Washington's respect for Arnold that led him to put the man in charge of Philadelphia, the de facto capital of the colonies, he left his general there for too long. Being the seat of the Continental Congress, Philadelphia was a hotbed of aristocracy and political nonsense that Benedict Arnold despised. It's here that Arnold met the wife described in the Arps Post. He all but begged Washington for a field position once he healed, but his relief was delayed over and over again. In fact, Washington put Arnold in charge of West Point for pretty much the same reason he put him in charge of Philadelphia, and it was this post that Washington had been saving Arnold for. Washington was just kept from disclosing this information from Arnold during the delays, and Arnold grew bitter. I'm skipping over quite a bit, but by the time he took charge at West Point, it was too late. If not for the treason, if not for his wife's influence, if not for political bullshit, not much has changed in 200 years, has it? If not for his own inability to play the game, Benedict Arnold would be seen today as the greatest hero to emerge from the American Revolution, second only George Washington himself. He wrote a sad ending to what should have been an amazing story. There was an American Nazi party prior to World War II that tried to stage a cut on the US government. Confessional booths were built by the church not for privacy but to prevent priests from having sex with young women and men. Catherine the Great had a secret sex salon full of furniture decorated with dicks, spread-eagled legs, and female mouths giving head, all tastefully embellished with a gold leaf. Gandhi conducted bizarre chastity experiments during which young boys and girls bathed and slept with each other but were punished for any sexual activity or talk. In Ireland during the Iron Age, the inauguration ceremony of a new leader involved the king to be publicly engaging in copulation with a white mare, which was eaten. I'm from Ireland and I can attest to that last part still being true today. Peter the Great had a thing for midgets. He would keep them around for entertainment, and if the mood struck him he'd kill them in bizarre ways, such as putting a billow up their ass and pumping them full of air until they died. When he got married he forced 2 midgets to get married in a ceremony that mirrored his own. He brought in midgets from all across Russia to be the guests, and then he and his friends laughed and made fun of them the entire time. During reception they forced them to drink copious amounts of alcohol, some of them even died from drinking. They made them do crazy stuff during the reception, and if my memory serves me correctly the bride and groom had to consummate the marriage in front of Peter while he laughed and humiliated them. Those prudish Victorians were really goddamn kinky. The men specifically, as most surviving erotica was produced for men. Being spanked, or the English vice, was especially popular, as was pedophilia. Don't believe me? Look up the maiden tribute of modern Babylon. Women, like men, could be institutionalized for masturbation. Seems like they had to use their imaginations, though, as pornography was very much aimed at men. What they had that men didn't was the ability to be more or less openly homosexual. The Romans had an effective natural contraceptive. It was a plant called silphium, and the shape of the seed is where we get the traditional heart, red heart card suit, shape we all recognize as a symbol of love. Anyway, they fucked so much that it went extinct. That millions more Chinese people died cruelly at the hands of the Japanese than Jewish people died at the hands of the Germans. The diary of Anne Frank was edited by her father because of some of the things she talked about, such as her period, discovering herself, learning about her clitoris labia, and learning some about boys from a younger guy that was staying with them too, and also her father's infatuation with fart jokes and such, which he didn't want published. I cannot seem to find the original article one read that went into much greater detail and showed some of what was edited out, but here, Ethnolgiant, blog archive. The expurgation of the clitoris and the diary of Anne Frank webpage is a brief article talking about it. Ben Franklin was a total man-whore. During World War II, the propaganda aimed at dehumanizing the Japanese was so successful that American Marines in the Pacific were keeping the body parts of Japanese soldiers as souvenirs. We also accidentally dropped care packages behind enemy lines. They had gigantic condoms in them so that when the Japanese soldiers found something that was supposed to be for Americans, they would think American men had tremendous dicks and they would make them feel inferior. The US tested nuclear bombs in Micronesia, causing hundreds of natives and their future children to be born with genetic defects. When the Russian Bolsheviks overthrew the provisional government and stormed the Winter Palace in 1917, their revolution was halted for a few days. The reason was because the Bolsheviks got ridiculously drunk in the Winter Palace after finding the wine stores. For sure, they don't teach you this in history class, but in colonial times, the person who got left in the stocks overnight was nothing less than fair game for everybody at a nail. Men or women, anybody bent over had no way of knowing who was doing the ram job, and this was the real reason you never wanted to end up here unless you had a family member or a friend who'd stand with you the whole time. To protect you. To watch your ass, for real Chuck Palahniuk, choke. The Romans had an effective natural contraceptive. It was a plant called silphium, and the shape of the seed is where we get the traditional heart, red heart card suit, shape we all recognize as a symbol of love. Anyway, they fucked so much that it went extinct. Fun story, not much truth to it. Silphium had a number of commercial uses, and may have primarily been seasoning. It is unclear what plant it was, so we're not clear if it went extinct. It's likely a type of giant fennel, or at least within the parsley family, of which we have some similar types today. The silphium industry was based on a narrow coastal area, and production did crash. It couldn't be cultivated. Pliny the Elder listed its many uses, including to promote the menstrual discharge. This is not a contraceptive but abortifacient. Greek gynecologist Soranus and herbalist Dioscorides described it in more detail, and do suggest it's a contraceptive in addition to abortifacient. It's unclear whether it was inactive, wide use as such, and whether it worked. Many herbs, including those in the parsley family, have been said to induce abortions. And the rest of the parsley family never went extinct, but historically they don't have a record of being used as abortifacient. Some of these herbal treatments did nothing, some could induce an abortion but might kill the woman too. Might just cause kidney failure. Of the 100 or so natural abortifacient, none are known today to be both safe and effective, but it is not well studied. There's a report that extracts of the surviving Ferola asafoetida and other Ferola species did prevent pregnancy in rats. Honestly, I think the subject does deserve some real research, but that isn't solid evidence so far. Similarly, the heart shape is speculative. There is no evidence for it. We don't know if a silphium seeds pod was that shape. Could have been that way, but it's just a shot in the dark show a thought spuriously promoted to fact. But, hey, yes, if I finish my time machine, headed to 3rd century Cyrenaica, unpicking a few would be high on my list of things to do. A college history professor I had told us that Martin Luther came up with the idea of salvation through faith alone when, while spending an entire day in prayer, he got a boner in church. He thought, well, fuck me, if I can sin while deep in meditative prayer, maybe no one can avoid sin, and the only thing saving us is our belief. I haven't been able to verify this on my own, however, so either I haven't found it yet or he was just bullshitting us. He was a very good professor otherwise, so I tend to believe him. Apparently he wasn't aware that lack of sleep results in no reason boners. Most of Shakespeare's famous lines were dirty talk and sex slang. A rose by any other name was not a clever analogy to romantic love, but a direct reference to one of his employer's theaters, which were the modern equivalent of brothels, which itself was a slang for vagina, a triple entendre. A solid numbers of his poems were suggestive or directly referred to genitalia and sex acts. Really changes your perspective on his writing. High school got him so wrong. Lavrentiy Beria was one of Stalin's right-hand men and head of the NKVD, Soviet secret police, during the Second World War. He led the huge Soviet espionage operation against the US that helped them build an atomic bomb, supervised the installation of communist regimes in Eastern Europe, and is rumored to have even off the feared Stalin. He was also apparently a serial sexual predator. He regularly had women detained in his Moscow villa where he would wine, dine and subsequently rape them. Members of the Politburo including Stalin himself knew of this and warned their wives and daughters away from him. He had his bodyguard keep a list of his victims. It is probable he even had some of these women killed. Human remains were found in the grounds of his former home in the mid-90s. Stalin might have been bad, but compared to his fellow Georgian he seems saintly. Christopher Columbus kept a diary, and it is easily on par with some of the worst acts of ISIS. Rape, murder, and torture were pretty common. One passage is about how he fed babies to dogs and made the mothers watch. Edit to add, I linked to a PDF of his journal below. Feeding babies to dogs is not some clickbait worst of the 177-page diary. Parts of it is gruesome and done in such a nonchalant narration that it's kinda freaky. I still can't believe they haven't revoked the day yet. Columbus was a fucking evil sociopath. Even the Spanish crown, a notoriously hateful institution, told him to tone it the fuck down. I was reading a scholarly journal about JFK's assassination. The mafia, the whole Kennedy family, and anyone connected to the Kennedy family had a lot of beef. One day one of JFK's representatives was in Las Vegas, where he saw a mafia member. This meant bad news for him. The mafia member called his friends and they beat him up until he was knocked out. Kennedy's rep woke up with a huge stomach ache. He thought it would go away, but it didn't. He headed to a hospital. He checked in, and got an X-ray. The results, he had a cucumber in his ass. The mafia members later contacted Kennedy's rep, and told him to watch out, because next time it would be a watermelon. In the journal this was used as evidence that Kennedy was shot by the mafia. Either way, this shit is hilarious. I hope this doesn't get buried. Everyone on Reddit deserves to laugh at this. Prophet Muhammad is a treasure trove for this. Had sex slaves, was allowed more than the normal 4 wives for Muslims because Allah liked him so much. His wife Aisha even noticed and claimed, I notice your Lord hastens in fulfilling your desires. Criticism of Muhammad. Wikipedia web page. Ownership of slaves. Carried out a genocide against a Jewish tribe on questionable basis. Invasion of Banu Qurayza. Wikipedia web page. Had people who insulted Islam and advocated against him executed or assassinated. Kabi bin al-Ashraf. Wikipedia web page. As soon as Muhammad died, majority of Arabian tribes abandoned Islam. Some refused to follow Abu Bakr. Some left Islam entirely because they were forced into it to begin with. Some followed other prophets. War was waged to bring all these groups back into Islam through force. Ridda Wars. Wikipedia web page. As mentioned above, many self-proclaimed prophets rose up after Muhammad, including one woman. They were all killed or forced to convert to Islam. Wikipedia web page. Wikipedia web page. Musaylama. Wikipedia web page. Muhammad advocated drinking camel urine. The benefits of drinking camel urine. Islam question and answer web page. He married Aisha when she was 6, and consummated the marriage when she was 9. Criticism of Muhammad. Wikipedia web page. Aisha. This is often used as an excuse for child marriage in countries like Yemen today. Muhammad walked in on his adopted son's wife, Zainab, by mistake while she was naked in loose clothing. He became obsessed with her, and his adopted son divorced Zainab so Muhammad could marry her, which was a big no-no in Arab culture at the time, considered incest. Muhammad received a convenient revelation that allowed him to marry Zainab and pretty much abolished the concept of adoption in Islam from then on. Zainab bint Jahsh. Wikipedia web page. Marriage to Muhammad. Muhammad tortured a man to find treasure hidden in his village, then executed him because he wouldn't reveal it. He took that man's wife as his slave and later married her after she converted. Kinano ibn al-Rabi. Wikipedia web page. Voltaire wrote a play critical of Muhammad, based around the critics Muhammad had executed assassinated as mentioned above. Mahomet. Play. Wikipedia web page. Muhammad had 2 men accused of murder and apostasy tortured by cutting off their hands and feet, pressing heated nails on their eyes to gouge them out, and then leaving them to wander the desert. For an Explorer web page. I have a lot more but I'll stop there. I got this one. So, most people know that the Romans wiped their asses with sponges on a stick. Most don't know they soaked said sponges in vinegar. We are all told about how when Jesus was dying on the cross, some Roman soldier gave Jesus sour wine on a sponge. Most people don't connect the two. Yes, the Roman soldiers had Jesus suck on a shit sponge when he was dying of thirst and then laughed at him. Our Ask Historians disagrees with this interpretation. The sour wine referenced in John was most likely posca, which was a sour wine beverage that was a common drink for the average Roman soldier, a mixture of sour wine or vinegar, water, and herbs. I know of no historian who suggests that the New Testament writers were making an allusion to Roman toilet practices. In fact, this sounds more like a literary device that we would put into a book today, rather than what someone living near the time of Christ would have invented in what purports to be a historical account. Jesus, the crucifixion, and the sponge with sour wine. Ask Historian's webpage, edit, to everyone asking why would they have a sponge, that's also addressed in the post I linked. It's a simple practicality. If you want a guy who's tied up on a crucifix to drink something, you have to shove it in his mouth. Since he's up high, the simplest way to do that is soak a sponge in whatever you want them to drink and shove it onto the tip of a long stick. The Romans would supposedly give alcohol or drugs to crucifixion victims this way, variously to dull the agony or to send them on loopy trips that made an already terrible death worse.